Thunder tore across the sky. Rain slammed against the stained glass windows of Halvern Keep as servants ran through the corridors in panic. Inside the grand hall, candles trembled. A woman's voice broke the silence.
You summoned the entire court, only to shame me?
At the far end of the chamber, Duke Theodric Halvern stood beside a younger woman whose hand rested proudly on her swollen belly. His eyes were cold enough to freeze blood.
I summoned them to witness the future of this house.
Gasps rose around the hall. Odette's fingers shook.
I am your wife.
You were my wife.
The room went still. The pregnant woman smiled faintly.
My lord, shall I sit in her chair now? Or after she leaves?
Odette turned pale.
After all I gave you, after every child, after every prayer.
Theodric stepped forward, voice like steel.
You gave me daughters.
Silence crashed harder than thunder.
And she carries me a son.
The crowd erupted in whispers. Odette staggered back as though struck.
You cast me aside for a promise.
No, for an heir.
He tore the wedding ring from his finger and dropped it on the marble floor. The sound echoed through the hall.
By sunrise, you and your shame will be gone from my estate forever.
Odette's eyes filled with tears, but her voice did not break.
Then hear me well, Duke. The day you beg for what you threw away, even God may not open my door.
Thunder exploded, and deep beneath her trembling hand, 2 unborn sons waited in silence. What happens when a proud man destroys the only woman who truly loved him? Stay with us till the end, and if stories of betrayal, revenge, and justice move you, please like, subscribe, and join us for more unforgettable tales. Lady Odette Renly stood beside the nursery window, fastening the last pearl button on her youngest daughter's coat, while the child complained about the cold. Outside, mist covered the lawns, and the morning bells from the village chapel rolled softly through the gray air. Odette bent, kissed the girl's forehead, and sent her toward the governess with a gentle smile that faded the moment the door closed. Her days always began with care for others. Before breakfast was served, she had already reviewed the kitchen accounts, instructed the housekeeper on linens for the west wing, written replies to 3 invitations, chosen flowers for the dining room, and sent broth to an elderly gardener too proud to admit illness. Servants respected her because she remembered names, birthdays, and griefs. If a maid cried, Odette noticed. If a footman limped, Odette asked why. When she first married Duke Theodric Halvern, she believed kindness would make a home warmer than stone walls ever could. In the early years, he had not been cruel. Reserved, yes, proud, certainly. But he had once thanked her for bringing light into rooms he never knew were dark. He had ridden beside her through spring fields, placed shawls over her shoulders when evening winds rose, and listened when she spoke. Those memories now felt like letters written in fading ink. At breakfast, silver covers were lifted from dishes of kedgeree, buttered toast, poached eggs, grilled tomatoes, smoked kippers, and preserves from last summer's berries. The Duke entered late, already dressed for riding. He kissed neither wife nor child. He took coffee, read correspondence, and asked only whether the stablemaster had returned.
Our middle daughter has a fever.
Send for the physician.
She asked if you might visit before lessons.
She will recover without ceremony.
He folded the letter and rose. Odette watched him leave with untouched toast still warm on his plate. Such moments had become common after the birth of each daughter. With the first child, disappointment was hidden behind strained smiles. With the second, silence lengthened at table. By the third, he no longer pretended joy. He congratulated the doctor, tipped the nurses, and did not enter Odette's chamber until 2 days later. Society did the rest. At dinners, noblemen spoke loudly of sons learning estate maps before they could read. Older ladies discussed family lines as if women were fields meant only to yield crops. One bishop, red-faced from port wine, had once said in Theodric's hearing that great houses fell not from war, but from empty cradles. Odette remembered how tightly her husband's jaw set. From then on, he counted everything: birth years, inheritance laws, distant male cousins, rumors of rival houses gaining strength. His pride turned worry into bitterness, and bitterness into blame. That afternoon, she prepared for a hunting luncheon attended by neighboring families. Platters of roast pheasant, pigeon pie, seed bread, cress salad, apple tart, and spiced wine were arranged in the gallery. Odette moved through the room checking details, while laughter drifted in from arriving guests. She entered later on her husband's arm, elegant in pale blue silk, chin lifted, though she felt the familiar scrutiny. "Still no boy?" whispered Lady Marrow to another woman who did not whisper low enough. "A pity," came the reply. "She is lovely, but beauty cannot inherit land." Odette kept smiling. Across the room, Lord Cassian Halvern approached with easy charm and polished manners. He bowed over her hand and praised the luncheon, then turned to the Duke with brotherly warmth. "You host magnificently, cousin," said Cassian, "yet a house this grand deserves a young master racing through its halls." Theodric's face hardened slightly. Cassian lowered his voice just enough for it to seem private. "Forgive me, I only worry. Men notice these things. Weakness invites opportunists." Odette caught the words and the satisfaction hidden beneath them. Cassian was always pleasant to her face. He complimented her gardens, brought sweets for the girls, offered help whenever asked. Yet whenever he left a room, the air felt dirtier. In the months that followed, Theodric changed further. He stayed longer in London, shorter at family supper, sharper with servants. He criticized small matters he once ignored: the placement of candles, the starch in collars, the noise of children's laughter in corridors. One evening, she found him alone in the library, staring at portraits of dead Halverns.
"You scarcely sleep.
I think.
Then think with me, not against me."
Can you give me what I need?
Pain moved through her like cold water.
"I have given you loyalty."
I did not ask for loyalty.
He walked past her before she could answer. Winter deepened. Snow edged the windows. Rumors arrived before truth ever did. A coachman mentioned seeing the Duke in town with a veiled lady wearing emerald gloves. A seamstress said expensive gowns were ordered in another woman's measurements. Two maids swore they heard laughter in the east corridor after midnight. Odette dismissed gossip aloud, though dread had already taken root. Then, on a Thursday morning, while reviewing menus for the week, the butler entered carrying a cream envelope sealed with the Halvern crest. "His Grace requests preparations for a grand dinner tomorrow evening," he said carefully. "How many guests?" 42, my lady." She nodded. "Very well. I shall begin at once." The old man hesitated. "My lady," his eyes dropped, "your name was not included among those to be seated." By dusk, Halvern House glowed like a palace prepared for triumph. Every window blazed with candlelight. Servants moved swiftly through corridors, carrying silver trays, crystal decanters, folded napkins, and steaming dishes from the kitchens below. The scent of roasted lamb, buttered asparagus, glazed carrots, mushroom pies, fresh bread, and cinnamon pears drifted through the halls. Musicians tuned their instruments in the drawing room while guests arrived beneath umbrellas and cloaks, their polished shoes wet from the rain. Lady Odette Renly stood in her dressing room, fastening a modest sapphire necklace. She had chosen one of her simpler gowns, deep ivory silk with long sleeves and delicate lace at the collar. If she had not been invited to sit at the table, she would still appear with dignity. No one would say the lady of Halvern House hid from discomfort. Her maid brushed tears away before opening the door.
My lady, perhaps His Grace forgot. Men forget anniversaries. They do not forget 42 guests.
When she entered the great hall, conversation softened. Faces turned. Some offered polite nods. Others quickly looked away. The long dining table glittered beneath chandeliers. Silver candelabras cast warm light over crystal goblets and fine china edged in gold. At the head of the room stood Duke Theodric Halvern in black evening dress, severe and handsome, one hand resting behind his back. Beside him stood Rowena Blackwell. She wore emerald satin cut to flatter the fullness of her figure. Diamonds rested at her throat. One gloved hand lay across the unmistakable curve of pregnancy. Her lips carried the faintest smile, as though she had arrived early to enjoy a private joke. The room became still enough for the fire to be heard. Odette walked forward slowly. "You wished to see me?" Theodric did not offer his arm, his hand, or a chair. "I wished all present
I
to
wished all
witness a
present to witness a
necessary
necessary
correction."
correction.
A murmur moved through the guests. Odette looked from him to Rowena and understood more in one heartbeat than many women learned in years. "You shame yourself," she said quietly.
No.
"No,"
I
he
repair
replied.
what has been
"I
endangered."
repair what has been endangered."
For years, Halvern House has lacked certainty. My marriage has produced daughters only. No male heir. No secure continuation.
Several guests lowered their eyes. No one spoke. Odette felt blood drain from her face. "Do not do this here." He continued as though she had not spoken.
Miss Blackwell carries my son. The future of this house is already formed.
Cassian, standing near the wine table, lifted his glass with satisfaction hidden behind sympathy. Odette steadied herself on the back of a chair.
You parade
another woman before your children's mother and call it honor?
I call it
I call it necessity. You
You
call cruelty by finer names. Theodric's expression hardened.
From this evening,
Rowena Blackwell assumes management of Halvern House. He nodded toward the housekeeper, who approached trembling. "Lady Odette Pease." The woman hesitated, then held out a hand. Odette slowly removed the ring of household keys from her belt. Keys to stores, linen rooms, accounts, wine cellars, and staff offices. Symbols of years of labor and trust. She placed them one by one. Theodric was not finished. "Her chambers are to be prepared for Miss Blackwell." Rowena's smile deepened. "Her jewels belonging to Halvern are to remain with the estate." Odette touched the sapphire necklace at her throat and unclasped it herself. "Take it," she said. "Stone never made a lady." Theodric stepped closer, voice low enough to sting. "You will leave tonight." A sharp pain moved through her lower body. She pressed a hand discreetly against her side, assuming grief had turned physical. "And where shall I go?" "That no longer concerns me." She looked around the room. Men who praised her dinners stared at their plates. Women who borrowed her cooks studied candle flames. No one would risk offending a duke. Odette lifted her chin. Then let it be remembered that when power was tested, it hid behind silence. Rowena moved gracefully to the head chair and sat in Odette's place before the servants had even removed the previous napkin. She smoothed the tablecloth and asked for wine. The insult was so complete it almost freed her from pain. A small leather bag containing a cloak, gloves, and a few plain garments was brought to her. Nothing more. Rain battered the front doors as they opened. Cold wind rushed inside. No escort came forward. Odette turned once to look at the man she had served, defended, and loved. He had already taken his seat beside Rowena. She spoke clearly enough for every soul in the room to hear. "I will never beg for a place where love never lived." Then she walked into the storm. Rain struck her face like thrown gravel. The road beyond the gates was dark, slick, and empty. her shoes soaked through within minutes. Another wave of pain tightened across her body, sharper this time, but she kept moving, believing heartbreak had simply found new ways to wound. A mile from the estate, she saw a roadside cottage with smoke rising weakly from its chimney. Light flickered through cracked curtains. She knocked once before the world tilted. When she woke on a narrow bed, an elderly widow hovered nearby with a basin of water and worried eyes. "You collapsed in the mud," she said gently, "and if I know anything after 6 children of my own—" She paused, then placed a hand over Odette's trembling fingers. "My dear, you are with child." The widow's name was Mrs. Bramble, a small woman with rough hands, soft eyes, and the habit of speaking kindly even when life gave no reason for it. Her cottage stood near the edge of a narrow road, lined with hedges and wet fields, far enough from town that gossip arrived late and left quickly. She asked few questions. When Lady Odette Renly gave only the name Odette, the widow accepted it. The months that followed were hard and quiet. Odette helped where she could, sweeping floors, peeling potatoes, mending shirts, and carrying water when the dizziness allowed it. Morning sickness left her weak. Fear kept her awake. Shame visited often, though it belonged to another man. At night, she would rest one hand over her growing stomach and stare at the small ceiling beams above the bed. The sons he wanted, she thought more than once, were already his when he threw me away. Winter arrived early that year. Frost climbed the cottage windows like white vines. Wind pressed through cracks in the wood. On the first night of heavy snow, labor began. It lasted until morning. Mrs. Bramble boiled water, changed cloths, prayed loudly, and scolded pain itself as if it were an intruder. Odette screamed until her throat burned raw. The first child came pale and furious, fists clenched against the world. Before she had gathered breath, another pain tore through her, deeper than the first. A second cry filled the room. Twin boys. Odette lay trembling, tears slipping into her hair, as the widow placed the infants beside her. One had a dark curl near his ear, the other gripped her finger with surprising strength. She named them Elias and Jonah. Mrs. Bramble smiled through exhaustion. 2 fine lads, enough noise for 6 children. Odette laughed weakly, then cried harder. When spring softened the roads, she considered writing to Halvern House. She imagined the Duke learning that the heirs he desired had been born beneath a poor woman's patched roof. She imagined his regret. Then she remembered the dinner hall, the silence of guests, the ring striking marble, the rain. No letter was sent. "My sons will never be used to heal a proud man," she whispered one dawn, while feeding them by the hearth. Money thinned quickly. The little coins Mrs. Bramble had saved could not support 3 more mouths for long. Odette opened the lining of the bag she had carried from the estate and removed what remained hidden there, a pair of pearl earrings and a gold clasp no servant had noticed. She sold them in town. With the money, she purchased damaged bolts of silk from a merchant whose warehouse had leaked during a storm. The cloth was stained at the edges and wrinkled through the center. Others saw waste. Odette saw possibility. At candlelight, while the twins slept in a basket near the fire, she cut away flaws, re-dyed panels, stitched ribbons, and turned ruined fabric into scarves, gloves, collars, and elegant evening wraps. Her fingers blistered, her eyes reddened, yet each finished piece looked finer than the material it came from. Women in town began to ask for the widow's silk. Orders grew. A retired banker named Mr. Hargreaves first came to the cottage to buy a shawl for his sister. He was tall, silver-haired, and carried the precise manners of a man who once trusted ledgers more than people. He noticed her accounts written neatly in a school notebook. "You price too low," he said after scanning the page. "I price what they can pay." "You must also price what you are worth." He returned the next week with tea, proper account books, and unsolicited advice. He taught him margins, contracts, supply chains, and the danger of relying on one buyer. He explained how money should be moved, protected, and multiplied. Odette learned quickly. Within a year, she rented a small workroom in town and employed 2 seamstresses. By the 3rd year, she supplied shops in neighboring counties. Profits went not into jewels or display, but into mills, transport shares, and warehouse space, suggested by Mr. Hargreaves. She signed all papers simply O. Renly. No one connected the successful businesswoman to the cast-out wife of a duke. Meanwhile, Elias and Jonah grew sturdy and bright. She taught them letters before most children their age held pencils. They thanked servants, shared bread, and never mocked poverty. When they asked about their father, she answered carefully, "You come from a family that forgot what matters." "Will we meet him?" Jonah asked once. "When truth is ready," she said. 5 years passed. Odette now lived in a handsome country house with clean windows, polished floors, and shelves full of books. Her son studied with tutors in the mornings and ran laughing through orchards by afternoon. She wore fine clothing again, but chose comfort over splendor. Kindness had returned to her face, though innocence had not. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the glass, Mr. Hargreaves arrived, carrying fresh newspapers and an expression sharpened by gossip. He removed his gloves slowly. "Halvern Keep is beginning to rot from inside." When Rowena Blackwell delivered a healthy boy less than a year after entering Halvern House, the bells of the estate rang from dawn until sunset. Barrels of ale were opened in the village. Roasted beef, pies, sugared buns, and plum wine were served to tenants in celebration. Duke Theodoric Halvern held the infant before a crowded drawing room and declared that the future of Halvern blood was secure at last. No one mentioned the wife cast out in rain. No one mentioned how quickly sorrow had been replaced. The boy was christened Adrian. Silver rattles were commissioned, portraits painted, and a nursery decorated in blue silk and carved oak. The Duke walked lighter for a time, convinced fate had corrected itself. If servants exchanged uncertain glances at the child's pale gray eyes and sharp chin, they kept such thoughts buried. Years passed, and triumph soured. Halvern House remained grand to visitors. Chandeliers still glittered, the lawns were clipped, carriages still arrived for dinners and hunting weekends. Yet beneath polished surfaces, disorder spread quietly through every corridor. Rowena ruled the household through vanity and temper. She slept late, demanded breakfast in bed on silver trays, and complained if the eggs cooled before reaching her chamber. She changed gowns 3 times a day, ordered perfumes from Paris, gloves from Milan, and lace from Brussels, while unpaid invoices piled in the steward's office. She had no patience for those who remembered Lady Odette. An elderly maid who once dressed Odette's hair was dismissed for placing flowers she preferred in the morning room. A cook who had served the family 20 years was reduced to tears when Rowena flung a spoon into a saucepan and called his food peasant fare. 2 footmen were sent away merely for bowing too warmly to a portrait of the former lady. The old portraits themselves began disappearing. One was moved to a dusty attic, another was sold quietly through an art dealer. When the housekeeper protested that it belonged to the Halvern line, Rowena smiled. "Then let the Halvern line buy it back." Young Adrian grew in the image of indulgence. At 5, he struck servants with riding crops cut to his size. At 6, he demanded sweet pastries before breakfast and threw them if not sugared enough. The Duke corrected him lightly, then excused the behavior as spirit. "A future master must be strong," he said. Yet even he began to notice changes he could not dismiss. Wine cellars emptied faster than gatherings required. Repair funds vanished, though roofs leaked in the west wing. Tenant complaints increased. Ledgers no longer balanced cleanly. Whenever questions arose, Lord Cassian Halvern stepped forward with calm explanations. A delayed shipment, cousin, storm damage in the North Fields, a dishonest clerk already dismissed. Cassian had become indispensable. He managed rents, contracts, staff disputes, hunting schedules, and correspondence. He soothed the Duke's temper, praised Adrian's progress, and gently suggested Rowena's extravagance was merely the harmless taste of a spirited woman. Theodoric accepted what spared him discomfort. He did not see the glances shared across supper tables when Rowena and Cassian believed him distracted. He did not question why Cassian entered private corridors after midnight. He did not ask why Rowena's laughter often ceased the moment he entered a room. One wet afternoon, the Duke found Rowena ordering a pair of sapphire bracelets more costly than a tenant farm. "This is excessive," he said. She turned slowly, studying her reflection rather than his face. "You wanted an heir. He deserves a mother worthy of him. You spend as though estates refill themselves. Then work harder." For a moment he looked at her as though seeing a stranger. Cassian entered before anger could settle. "Cousin, the buyers from Kent await your signature." The tension dissolved into paperwork. Days later, Theodric announced he would travel to inspect distant lands after reports of poor harvests and unpaid rents. He would be gone 3 nights, perhaps 4. Rowena kissed his cheek before servants. Adrian waved from the staircase without leaving his sweet pudding. Cassian insisted on remaining behind to oversee matters. The Duke departed after sunrise in a black motorcar, its tires crunching over gravel while mist still clung to the gardens. By afternoon, rain began. By evening, it hardened into sheets against the windows. At supper, Rowena dined lavishly on duck in orange glaze, buttered potatoes, warm rolls, and chocolate pudding. She sent the child to bed early and dismissed most servants from the upper floor. Near midnight, candles still burned beneath her chamber door. Storms often disrupted country roads, bridges flooded, engines failed. No one expected the Duke back. Yet just after midnight, another motorcar rolled silently through the gates, mud-splashed and early. Theodric stepped out into the rain, unannounced. The rain had not stopped when Duke Theodric Halvern stepped from the motorcar and crossed the rear entrance of Halvern House. Water ran from the brim of his hat and darkened the shoulders of his coat. The journey had been cut short when a bridge ahead was declared unsafe. Irritated and tired, he chose to return rather than waste a night in some provincial inn. The house should have been asleep. Instead, light glowed beneath the upper corridor doors. He handed his gloves to a startled footman and moved quietly toward the private stair reserved for family. The servants avoided his eyes. Somewhere in the distance, a clock struck midnight. As he reached the landing near Rowena Blackwell's chamber, he heard laughter. Low, careless laughter. A man's voice answered. Theodric stopped. The chamber door was not fully closed. Candlelight spilled through the narrow opening onto the carpeted corridor. He stepped nearer without sound. Inside, Rowena reclined against pillows in a silk robe, her hair loose over bare shoulders. On the bedside table stood a silver bucket with melting ice around an open bottle of champagne, 2 glasses, sliced pears, sugared almonds, and strawberries. A man sat at the edge of the bed in shirt sleeves, boots discarded on the rug. Lord Cassian Halvern. Rowena laughed again and took a grape from the plate. You should have seen him that day, standing so proud while he cast her out for me. Cassian drank deeply. Proud men are easiest to lead. You only needed tears and a rounded belly. She touched his chin with playful fingers. And you only needed to whisper into his ear about legacy and sons. Both laughed. Theodric's hand gripped the doorframe until his knuckles whitened. Cassian leaned back comfortably. 5 years he has called Adrian his heir. Our Adrian, Rowena corrected, smiling. Yes, our son in the nursery, wearing another man's name. She burst into delighted laughter. He never once questioned those eyes. They are yours entirely. Theodric's breathing changed. Inside the room, Cassian reached for a document case on the chair beside him. A little patience more, he said. His health worsens yearly. Once the old fool falls, I guide the estate as guardian to the child. We sell lands, move funds, and live as we please. Rowena lifted her glass. To widowed comfort. To inherited comfort. They kissed. Something inside the Duke tore wider than flesh. He shoved the door open so hard it struck the wall. Both sprang apart. The champagne glass shattered on the floor. Cassian stood first, color draining from his face. Rowena clutched the robe to her chest. "Theodric," she began. "You—" He tried to speak, but the word tangled in his throat. Pain slammed through his chest like iron. His right arm dropped uselessly to his side. The room tilted. He staggered forward, mouth twisting, one leg failing beneath him. Cassian stepped back instinctively. The Duke collapsed heavily onto the carpet. For one frozen second, no one moved. Then Cassian snatched his boots, coat, and the document case. "Help him," Rowena hissed. "You help him." He ran. By the time servants heard shouting and reached the corridor, he was already gone through the rear stair and into the storm. Rowena knelt beside the Duke only long enough to see that one side of his face had slackened, and his speech was broken. Fear overtook concern. She stood at once. "Awake the doctor," she ordered, then hurried not to the medicine cabinet, but to the dressing room. Servants rushed in around the fallen man, while Rowena dragged trunks from wardrobes. She filled them with velvet jewelry cases, deeds, bank papers, cash boxes, pearl sets, fur wraps, and gowns folded carelessly. She sent a maid to fetch Adrian from the nursery. The child, sleepy and confused, asked where they were going. "Somewhere richer," she snapped. Below stairs, the doctor arrived breathless and worked over the Duke for hours. Leeches, hot cloths, smelling salts, injections, commands. Near dawn, Theodric opened one eye. His mouth would not form words properly. His right arm lay still. His leg would not answer him. The physician's face grew grave. "Severe paralysis brought on by violent shock," he murmured to the steward. "He may live, but he will not be the same man." Theodric fought for breath and forced sound through half-working lips. Guards!" The steward bent close. "Detain her!" Men ran upstairs. They found Rowena at the rear entrance, trunks stacked beside her, Adrian crying in a coat thrown over nightclothes. Jewels spilled from an overfilled case onto the floorboards. She screamed that she was mistress of the house. She threatened lawsuits, scandal, ruin. No one listened. By sunrise, she was locked in the east guest room under watch. The storm had passed. Grey light crept across Halvern House, revealing broken glass, muddy carpets, and a silence deeper than any night before it. In the sick room, Theodric stared at the canopy above his bed, unable to turn his head fully, unable to move half his body, unable to outrun memory. For the first time in years, his voice carried no command, only regret. Where is Odette Wenley? The weeks after the collapse changed Halvern House more than any war could have done. Duke Theodric Halvern no longer strode through halls with polished boots and sharp commands. He sat in a wheeled chair near the library fire, one side of his body heavy and unresponsive, his speech slower, his temper replaced by a silence servants had never known. He needed help to dress, help to eat, help to turn pages. The humiliation of dependence carved through him daily. Yet pain sharpened what pride once dulled. Ledgers were brought to him, receipts, deeds, jewelry inventories, letters, household accounts, rental books, and dismissed complaints he had never bothered to read. Hour by hour, he uncovered theft hidden beneath years of trust. Payments to false suppliers, land sold below value, family silver missing, funds moved through names tied to Lord Cassian Halvern. Cassian had vanished completely. Searches were ordered in London, Liverpool, and the ports. Nothing returned but rumours of a gentleman travelling under another name. Rowena Blackwell was brought before the household in the morning room, where she once gave commands from velvet chairs. Now she stood in plain clothes, pale with fury, while clerks listed seized property on long sheets of paper. Jewels purchased with estate funds were taken, cash boxes emptied, imported gowns packed away. Her allowance ended before witnesses. Young Adrian was formally removed from succession records. The family solicitor read the declaration aloud while senior staff stood present. Rowena spat insults until her voice cracked. When she was driven from the gates with only personal clothing and a modest sum, no servant wept. The house seemed to breathe easier after she left. Still, none of it brought peace. One rainy afternoon, while reviewing old medical correspondence, the Duke found a physician's note dated the week after Odette's exile. It referred to symptoms likely of early pregnancy, reported by a village widow who had sought advice for a gentlewoman refusing to name herself. His hand shook. More records followed, dates of missed courses, noted discreetly by a former maid, a purchase of infant cloth in a northern village months later, a parish baptism entry listing twin boys born to O. Renly. The room blurred before him. He demanded witnesses. Mrs. Bramble, older now but sharp-eyed, was brought under escort. She recognized him at once and did not curtsy. "She was carrying your children when you cast her into the storm. 2 sons, nearly died bringing them into this world." The words struck harder than illness. Merchants then spoke of a prosperous northern lady with twin boys who bore the Holven eyes, the Holven brow, the Holven stubborn chin. Tutors praised their manners, tenants admired their kindness, investors respected their mother. The Duke sent for portraits of his own father and grandfather. He stared from those painted faces to the descriptions given. There was no doubt left. He had destroyed the one woman loyal to him and thrown away the heirs he worshipped in theory. That night he dismissed everyone. The fire burned low. Rain tapped the windows. Servants outside the library heard sounds no one thought possible from such a man. Sobbing. Not elegant tears, but broken, choking grief dragged from a chest too full of regret. By morning his eyes were swollen and his jaw set. "Prepare the carriage," he ordered. The physician protested at once. "Travel may worsen your condition. The roads are rough, the weather cold. Prepare it." Blankets were packed, hot bricks wrapped for his feet, tonics loaded beside documents, and a velvet case containing the Holven signet ring. The journey north took long hours over wet roads and fields washed silver by mist. He said little, staring through the carriage glass at farms, villages, and hedgerows, passing like years he could not reclaim. At last, the driver slowed before wrought iron gates taller than a man. Beyond them stood not a cottage, not hardship, not ruin, but a grand manor of pale stone, with glasshouses, trimmed gardens, fountains, and rows of workers unloading bales of silk under the crest, Renly House. The iron gates of Renly House opened without hurry. Duke Theodric Halvern sat stiffly inside the carriage, gloved hands trembling against the blanket across his knees. He had prepared himself to see struggle, perhaps modest comfort, perhaps resentment sharpened by poverty. He was prepared for none of what stood beyond. A wide drive curved through winter gardens, carefully kept even in cold weather. Stone urns held evergreen shrubs clipped into elegant shapes. Glass houses shimmered beside the east lawn. Workers moved with purpose near warehouses where bolts of silk were being unloaded from wagons. Men tipped hats respectfully as the carriage passed. Women carrying ledgers crossed paths with clerks in tailored coats. This was not survival. This was power. The carriage stopped before broad front steps where lanterns burned warmly beneath a carved portico. A butler in dark livery opened the door. His Grace, the Duke of Halvern. The title sounded smaller here than it ever had at home. Then she appeared. Odette Renly descended the steps with measured grace, wearing a deep blue wool gown trimmed in black fur. Pearls rested simply at her throat. Her hair was arranged without excess. Nothing about her asked to be admired, yet admiration followed naturally. She looked stronger than beauty. She looked finished with fear. Theodric tried to rise too quickly and nearly stumbled. The butler steadied him. Shame colored his face. Odette noticed, but did not react. You have traveled far, she said. Her voice held no bitterness. That wounded him more than anger might have done. I came to speak with you. You have arrived. She stepped aside. Come in. The entrance hall smelled faintly of cedarwood and fresh bread. Floors shone. Paintings lined the walls, not ancestors demanding reverence, but landscapes, mills, ships, and portraits of workers gifted by grateful families. A fire burned in the morning room where tea had been laid with butter biscuits, sliced oranges, warm scones, and silver pots. No display was careless. Everything spoke of earned wealth. 2 boys entered moments later, carrying books under their arms. They stopped when they saw the visitor. Theodric's breath caught. They were perhaps 5 years old, upright and alert, dressed neatly in gray coats and polished shoes. One had a small dark curl near his temple. The other narrowed his eyes in thoughtful caution. Both carried the Halvern face so plainly it felt like judgment. Elias, Jonah, Odette said gently. This is Duke Halvern. The boys bowed because they had been taught manners. Neither smiled. Theodric's voice shook. My sons! Odette did not correct him, but neither did she soften the truth. They are boys first. Titles come later. He looked at them as starving men look at food they cannot touch. May I speak with them? You may greet them. He reached for words and found none worthy. He asked about studies instead. Elias spoke of Latin lessons. Jonah preferred maps and engines. Their voices were clear, respectful, and free of fear. Everything Adrian had not become. When the tutor led them to the schoolroom, silence settled. Theodric turned back to Odette, eyes wet. I was deceived. No, she replied calmly. You were willing to be deceived. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I have come to ask forgiveness. I forgave you years ago. Hope flickered across his face. She extinguished it gently. I forgave you so I could sleep in peace, not so I might return. He leaned forward in the chair. I was proud, blind, foolish. Name any fault and it is mine. Come back with me. Let the boys take their place. Let me mend what remains. You cannot mend by possession what was broken by contempt. Tears rolled down one side of his face. I loved you once. You loved what I gave you, order, loyalty, silence. When sons mattered more than truth, you cast me out before strangers. He bowed his head. You did not lose me because of Rowena. You lost me because appearances mattered more to you than character, and sons mattered more than the woman beside you. The room stayed quiet except for the fire. After a long while, she spoke again. The boys may know who their father is. They may visit Halvern when they are older, if they choose. They will inherit what is lawful, but all of it will happen on my terms, not yours. He nodded weakly, grateful for crumbs where once he commanded feasts. As servants helped him back to the carriage, he turned once more. Odette. She waited. I am sorry. I know, she said. The gates closed behind him as dusk settled over the grounds. The road back seemed longer. When he reached Halvern House, no lamps had been lit in the front windows. No laughter waited in the halls. No one watched for his return. Only a vast estate and the sound of his own wheels fading into silence.
Duke Theodric Halvern asked for the family solicitor, the steward, and every household ledger to be brought to the library. Rain touched the windows, while coal fires burned low and steady. He signed papers slowly with his left hand, each signature less elegant than the last. His will was rewritten in full. The greater estate, lands, investments, and title revenues would pass to Elias and Jonah in equal measure, held in trust under the guidance of Odette Winley until they came of age. Smaller bequests were left to loyal staff. Nothing remained for flatterers, distant opportunists, or the memory of Rowena. When business ended, he gave another order. Bring back her portraits. Dust-covered paintings were carried down from attics and storage rooms. One by one, images of Odette returned to the hall she once brightened. In one, she stood in garden sunlight, holding roses. In another, she sat beside a piano, eyes calm and hopeful. Servants hung them in silence. Corrupt staff who had stolen under Rowena's rule were dismissed. Wasteful contracts were cancelled. Accounts were repaired. Yet though order returned, warmth did not. The Duke took meals alone in the morning room. Poached fish, broth, bread, and tea were placed before him on silver trays. Much of it went untouched. He spent long hours near the fire with blankets over his knees, staring at portraits and hearing footsteps that never came. He wrote letters often. To Odette, he apologized again without excuse. To Elias and Jonah, he enclosed books, maps, and small mechanical puzzles. Replies arrived neatly written, always courteous. "Thank you for the atlas. We have begun learning rivers. Mother says proper gratitude matters. We hope your health improves." No letter ever asked when he would visit. At Renly House, life moved forward without bitterness. Odette expanded her silk mills into 3 counties. Looms clattered from dawn until evening. Women once trapped in poverty earned fair wages beneath clean roofs. Her sons studied history, languages, engineering, and estate management. They were taught firmness without cruelty, confidence without arrogance. When asked about their father, she answered truthfully, but never poisoned their hearts. 2 winters later, snow settled over Grand Halvan grounds in a white hush. The Duke's breathing had grown weaker for weeks. One night, after servants banked the fire and withdrew, he lay beneath heavy blankets in the great chamber that once felt like power itself. No wife held his hand, no child waited nearby. No laughter traveled the corridor. Only the ticking clock, the fading fire, and silence. By dawn, he was gone. At the reading of the will, drawing rooms across the county erupted in astonishment. Noble families who once praised his choice now whispered over teacups and newspapers. Everything had passed to the twin boys of the wife he had cast out. Months later, Odette walked through one of her largest mills while sunlight poured through high windows onto rows of shining silk. Workers greeted her warmly. Elias and Jonah walked beside her, taller now, carrying ledgers and plans for expansion. Far from Halvern, where silence once followed their absence, the daughters of Odette Renly grew into women of quiet strength and sharp minds. They had been dismissed as disappointments by Duke Theodric Halvern, yet they carried everything he had failed to recognize: discipline, intelligence, and dignity. The eldest studied law and estate governance, ensuring every contract under Renly Holdings was just and fair. The second turned toward medicine, tending to workers and families with steady hands and a kinder vision of power. The youngest, bright and observant, walked the mills and markets, learning trade not as a privilege, but as a responsibility. They did not grow bitter, they grew capable. In a house once judged by the absence of sons, it was the daughters who proved that legacy had never depended on gender, only on character. And when people spoke of Renly House, they no longer spoke of loss. They spoke of a family that had been underestimated and rose beyond it. At the doorway she paused and looked once toward the distant hills where Halvern lands lay unseen beyond the horizon. Then she turned forward and continued walking. Pride destroyed him. Mercy freed her.